Hello. Can everybody hear me? All right. My name is Andrew Dix. I am the founder of Crowd Media Group. We publish Crowdfund Insider. We cover the full stack of fintech, online capital formation, and of course, blockchain, which is a super hot space. Today, we're going to be tackling healthcare on the blockchain. While I typically focus on financial services industry, blockchain can do a lot more than just finance. So we've got a really cool panel today. I just was talking to everybody in the back room here. You're really lucked out in this panel, so I'm going to ask each of them to quickly introduce who they are and the name of their platform or service that they're doing right now. I'm going to start with Leah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Leah Houston. I am a physician, an emergency medicine physician, and I am working on a digital identity for physicians, creating a DAO of doctors. So.
Excellent. All right. Alex.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Alex Kahana. I like to call myself a crypto Sherpa. I didn't graduate medical school.
Sherpa.
You know,
like that.
Kind of living 15,000 feet in the air.
Is there some sort of board that you get that name?
Well, yeah. Anyway, I lived 4 lives in one. First life in the military, second life as a professor in pain medicine, and got all embroiled into the opioid epidemic. My third life is really in building different departments, and now I'm a crypto enthusiast, and I'm a venture partner at Crypto Oracle, and run the Crypto Health Advisory.
Yeah, the Crypto Sherpa. I'm going to remember that one. So Steve, tell me.
Steve Huff. I'm the CEO of a company called Preventim, and we focus on preventative health in the public health space. We individualize public health campaigns on mobile devices using gamification and AI, and we're currently working in the opioid crisis with a campaign we launched called FIND, which I'm advertising, called Full Energy No Drugs for Youth.
Excellent. All right, Evan.
Hi, I'm Evan McMullen. I am the founder and project lead of a team called Linea that sits within the Consensus ecosystem. Consensus is the world's leading Ethereum blockchain-based venture studio. And our protocol, our core competency, is a developer-focused set of tools that allows any application-level developer, regardless of their experience with Solidity or cryptography, to build on the Ethereum platform. And the way that this protocol is built is it also gives end users, so application end users like you and me, complete ownership and control of their data.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So healthcare. Healthcare, it's really a hot button topic in the United States and around the world. We had Obamacare that passed a number of years ago, and while it solved a few of the issues, I think everybody can admit that it wasn't the solution that we really needed. The costs continue to go up. Services continue to be questionable, and for the United States is the richest country in the world, for a developed nation, we're not providing the type of care that we should be at the amount that we're paying. I mean, in effect, healthcare, our system is broken. So there's this emerging thought and thesis that blockchain technology can fix or just be a panacea to all these woes. So first of all, I'm gonna ask Leah, because we had a nice conversation the other day about the real troubles with healthcare, and she kind of just went on a rant and explained everything that's going wrong. She's an ER doctor. She knows her stuff. She knows what she's talking about. So how broken is our healthcare system?
Very broken.
Tell me.
So before I became a physician, I also was involved in public policy. And I worked in health policy. I worked lobbying for universal health care back when I thought that that was the answer. And I've worked in emergency departments all over the country. So I've seen the inside and the outside of the problem. And this is a $3.9 trillion problem.
That's a lot of money.
It's the 5th biggest economy in the world.
Okay.
So, the US economy, China's economy, Japan's economy, Germany's economy, and then the US healthcare system is bigger than all the other countries' entire economy. And it's a big problem. And a third of that money is wasted unnecessarily. We spend 4 times as much in this country on administration of healthcare rather than actually providing healthcare. And physicians and patients are extremely frustrated. And
yes.
Everybody except for a few minority stakeholders are extremely frustrated. So blockchain does have the ability to alleviate some of these problems.
I mean, come on, does anybody think our healthcare system's working? It's not. It's broken. It's a disaster. So Leah is actually coming up with a unique service targeting a specific sector of the industry using blockchain. So can you share that with us now?
So a lot of people talk about data silos, and we talk about how our health information is trapped in these healthcare systems and in our insurance companies, and these are all these data silos. Well, something people don't realize is that physician talent is also trapped within these health system silos. If you're a patient and you're tethered to one health system and your doctor leaves, oftentimes you can't follow them. So you need to change doctors. Or if you move to a different job and you have a new insurance, you might have to change physicians as well. And nobody likes that. You want to stay, you want to keep your relationship with your physician. And so I'm creating the user experience for physicians that will kind of help prevent this, where patients can follow their doctors, doctors can follow their patients, and where we can continue to preserve the doctor-patient relationship. And the way I'm doing that is by giving digital identities to physicians, where they have their credentials attached to them, where they can move freely in an open healthcare marketplace, and keep them untethered from these systems.
Okay, so what do you think the hospitals are going to think about this? They're going to love you?
It really depends. I think in some ways it's going to alleviate some of the anti-competitive practices that have been occurring, allowing them to have more access to new physician talent. Because if a physician's untethered from one system, it makes them available to another system. So in some ways, they might think it's better. So, but some of these other, like I said, minority stakeholders might not like it so much. But
when you say minority stakeholders, you're talking about the insurance companies?
Sometimes the insurance companies, sometimes just large health systems that dominate a specific area.
Okay.
The consolidation of our health systems, we just recently heard about the CVS Caremark Aetna merger. If somebody doesn't see that and then see the price of prescription drugs going up and put two and two together, then they're not really looking deep enough at the problem. And so this consolidation and centralization of healthcare can be fixed with this decentralizing technology.
Okay, excellent. All right. Steve, you're kind of working on a different aspect of the healthcare system. You mentioned it, the company Preventim. You're working on opioid abuse, which, as we all know, it's a huge issue in the United States and elsewhere around the world. We were talking earlier today, I was asking you, well, you have a cool system where you can incentivize good behavior, and I think sometimes I need some incentive to have some good behavior. So maybe it's something for me too. Can you explain Preventim?
So first of all, the healthcare system is struggling, and we focus on prevention. And you talked about cost, Leah, and one of the things that the old adage in prevention is that for every dollar spent on prevention, you save $5 in your health system in terms of treatment. Well, with the opioid crisis now, according to SAMHSA, that's now $17 saved for every dollar you spend on prevention. So for us, there's an absolute call to do something around prevention. But the challenge with prevention is oftentimes in health, you're dealing with changing people's knowledge and changing people's behavior. And I know for myself in my own life that behavior change sucks. It's really hard. And so how do you do that on a large scale? How do we engage millions of people and help guide them through a process where they're changing their knowledge and their behavior? And so that's where we came up with the idea of Preventim, which uses AI and machine learning to individualize the conversation, and then we use gamification to reward people from moving from one thing to the other. And in the opioid crisis, with FIND, what we've been able to do is combine evidence-based content or research to build our content. We've been able to provide that point system, soon to be a token system, and reward people for going through different health missions. So youth can go through a guided journey where they learn about how to help a friend in need from an opioid overdose, how to spot the signs of an overdose, a whole range of different things that they learn, and we change that knowledge, and then we move down that public health model of then changing behavior, which is difficult, but when you have an incentive and a reward, it can make it easier, and that's what we've learned.
So how's that reward work? I mean,
Well,
You're
for
paying
us, as a kid would download the app and they onboard, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we're collecting some good data. And Evan and I have talked about this a lot. Data is so important in our health system because it informs what works and what doesn't work. And just even trying this, we need to make sure it works. So the first thing kids do is they onboard onto a survey. They then go through certain missions. They might watch a video and then take a little pop quiz, and at the end they do an exit survey. So we partnered this summer with a music tour called the Vans Warped Tour. I don't know if there's any punk rockers out there.
got any
But the
punks
Vans,
in the audience? Yeah?
any Vans fans? So the Warped Tour, longest running music festival in American history, started in 1996, launched the careers of bands like Blink-182, Green Day, Gwen Stefani, Katy Perry. And Finn joined the Vans Warped Tour and did 38 stops this summer. And we'd engage kids on the ground. They would download the app. So as a result of that, we now have 17,000 kids who've gone through the journey. They were rewarded with points. They could cash those points in for streetwear or backstage passes or tickets. But what it's given us in terms of data is the largest baseline data set in the world with youth in the opioid crisis. So this is really exciting to us because we were able to understand what type of gamification strategies did they respond to? What motivates them? And so by collecting this data, we can continue to improve that engagement.
I mean, that would be huge. If you can even alleviate a portion of the opioid crisis, that would be so impactful.
And this is one of the challenges. The opioid crisis, we focus on prevention, treatment, and recovery. And for us, we're focused on the prevention area. And we see a huge lack of resources in response. And now with money flowing from the federal government, there's just been another $6 billion approved going to the state governments to fight the opioid crisis. And as Alex knows, some of that is starting to come into prevention, which is our challenge of how to use that money. Is it evidence-based? Is it innovative? Is it practical? Does it work? And that's what we're trying to do.
So, and you're actually, next week you're going to Utah because you're working with people on the ground now, different states.
Yep.
You're getting traction here.
We are.
Really cool.
We have Utah, Rhode Island, Virginia have all put their hand up and said, yes, we want to roll FIND out now into our states and to engage our youth in starting to change their knowledge and behavior around opioids.
So I think the previous panel, somebody said that there's no use cases for blockchain. We got somebody who's doing it now using distributed ledger technology, which is really cool. And there's something else that I want to ask you because when we were talking before, you said, well, you're creating this marketplace. So he's creating this marketplace that opioids may be the first thing, but we can do this, you can do this, or all of us can do this, for everything, for lots of things.
Right, it's an engagement platform. So when you look at public health, I mean, we look at diabetes and obesity, we look at violence against women, smoking cessation. Whatever the campaign is, we're able to roll that out on the platform. And by creating a marketplace that's driven by token, we can engage researchers and graphic designers and videographers and different people to build these campaigns and engage then the customer, whether it be a state government in a developing country, to roll out those campaigns on a mobile device where people are hanging out.
I think that's awesome. So yes, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah, I want to tie to that because I know Steve well and what he's doing. I've been a pain physician for 28 years. I think I once calculated I saw over 75,000 patients. And thinking long and hard, I'm a subject matter expert for the Department of Defense and the VA and all these large healthcare systems that don't know how to wrap around their head around opioids is the manifestation of the failure of healthcare in general because it's not just addiction to drugs, it could be to sugar, it could be to too much work, too much everything, are suffering from affluenza. That's how this looks like. And I think that Steve, by the behavioral economics, that he puts in, touched into the fundamental problem in healthcare. And I've been asked multiple times on the Hill, they come to me and say, so Dr. Kahana, what do you think the problem is in healthcare? And I have, I say, what do you want, 5 minutes, 2 minutes? They say, how about 90 seconds? I'll say, I'll do it in 30, And so you have to think of sound bites. Well, healthcare doesn't work because we don't care about health. And so, but then the fundamental thing is, what is the opposite of health? So I'm asking you, it's not a trick question. What is the opposite of health? The opposite of health is? Illness, disease, right.
Yes.
And this is why we have a disease management system. But in reality, the opposite of health, and I'm sure that we all feel this, is not disease, it is isolation. That through disease and illness, our world starts to contract and become smaller and smaller until one day we wake up, we take a Xanax, an OxyContin. If we're a man, we take a single malt. If we're a woman, we take a Chardonnay, and we die every 7 minutes.
It's pretty grim. Wow.
And so if we agree for a second that the opposite of health is isolation, then the journey back to wellness is through connectedness.
We can have a cocktail later and we can discuss this further.
And so that's kind of where it's so true.
So I want to ask you, so I had a great conversation with Alex the other day because I'm not a doc and I'm not in the healthcare sector, but I am involved with a company that does self-managed healthcare. And this program that we have been doing for many years started out as a great program. People could take care of everything, no worries. They had to pay nothing. And over the years, the cost went up and up and up. And so we started to push, the services down, make the co-pays go up. And it still got worse and worse and worse. So then we said, well, we got to have, smoking cessation programs. We need to encourage people to go get annual checkups because then they'll be healthier. Because as you said, prevention is very important. That didn't work. Then Obamacare came along, and that didn't help. So it's just kind of a spiral. And the company eventually, healthcare was the the second or third biggest expense for the company. It was a disaster, and eventually we just sold it all off because that was like the last thing we could do. But you have a concept where you will incentivize people to actually fix the problem we had. Can you explain that for me, or for them?
Well, I think that you put your finger on what the problem is. We have been thinking about this not since yesterday. There's been an urgency to try to figure the insolvency of healthcare since I remember the mid-'80s when HMO started to come in. It was all about a reaction that we want evidence-based medicine and not eminence-based medicine. So this is not the first round that we're going through this. What is making this unsustainable is not also the accruing costs, but also that we die younger and younger. So this is like a really poor value proposition where we're paying more to die sooner.
It's a bad day. Yeah.
So when I'm speaking, I was invited to the Trust Project. It's all these oracles in value-based care, very sophisticated people that know their stuff. They're saying, one of the things that we need to do is we have to convert people from being passive health consumers that just consume more and more to health producers. And that kind of helped a little bit with the Fitbits and the Blueberries and eat better and do your Pilates, but not really. And it was just sitting down and saying, wait a second, maybe, like Steve is doing, we have to be a little bit more sophisticated with technology on how do we actually produce this health, this generic, incentive of $50 a coupon, or is there something that we can personalize? But what we talked on the phone is also to generate wealth, true wealth.
Think about that.
So like, for example, if I clean myself out from opioids, I'm like $25K a year for the rest of my life. That is a lot of money that I'm saving for the insurance company or for the state or for the safety net. I want a piece of that. I don't want some, $50 pittance of saying good job, and all that, and something, clapping their hands and saying good for you. I want a piece of that. And how cool is that to think that through security token offerings or through a securitized digital asset, I can actually own a piece of the platform that is making me healthier. So I'm even more motivated to convince other people to be involved because it's starting to become not only a community, but also an inclusionary economy.
Yeah, and so the light bulb came on for me here because I'm like, okay, we keep, our cost keeps going up. We keep, pushing it back down on the employee. But if I was, and so they're like, we're telling them stop smoking, your costs will go down, but there's no immediate payback. But if I tell somebody, you know what, if you don't drink that fifth of whiskey every week, I'm going to pay you money or give you equity or give you something that you get immediate value to, then that starts to make sense. That makes sense for me. I'd cut back on my alcohol consumption a little bit. And
it responsibilizes people. We've been treating patients very paternalistically, as if they're kids, they don't get it, they don't know, there'll be all these explanations of, oh, I know my patients, my grandma, perhaps it's a generational thing. When I listen to my wife, talk about blockchain, I say, no, that's not what I'm doing. But when I hear my 12-year-old, it's exactly that. So I think that it's not enough just to generate health, it's also to generate real wealth and be a participant in that fifth economy of the world.
Yeah, I like that. And so I'm thinking about for the self-funded plan that they would get some of that money back. When they had good, instead of us just dumping more in, they would get good behavior and they would get cash payout. That to me really makes sense. All right, Evan, so you're doing something really cool. It's even more macro. The platform that you're creating, and I was thinking about it, it's like, kind of like open banking for the healthcare system. Not that anybody wants to talk about that right now. That's really geeky. But explain to me what you are producing now, why, and where it's going.
Sure. So when we take a step back from just the specific healthcare space and think about the data that we emanate, that we generate as a function of our lives, we create data in the social space by interacting with things like Instagram and Facebook. We create data in the financial space by interacting with our banks or Venmoing one another. And so there are all these facets of our lives where a specific type of data is captured and then owned and controlled by a third party. So my financial data isn't really mine. My health data, I certainly don't have access to it on a regular basis. I don't feel that I own or control it. Same with my location data, et cetera. And so in this way, there is the idea of you having a digital identity is a thought experiment. It is physically impossible for you to aggregate all of the data that you've produced and look at it as a data picture or reflection of yourself. That is physically impossible because of the way that data structures exist today. And so our team has looked at the opportunities available in the blockchain space and especially on the Ethereum platform, and we see great opportunity if individuals and identities, whether those are sensors, my dog, or me, are able to accrue longitudinal data sets over time from various facets of their lives. And it is that objective that the protocol that we've built facilitates. Now, why is this relevant in the health space? Yeah. One use case that's really close to my heart is looking at chronic disease. So my younger brother has type 1 diabetes. So that means that his physical activity and diet, lifestyle choices on a day-to-day basis impact the expression of disease in his body. But because of the way that the data that describes that expression is stored, his HDL, A1C, waist circumference, weight, various blood levels, as well as his physical activity and diet, the way those data sets are stored, it is impossible for him to look at all those data sets day by day and say, this is the way that my choices impacted my health on this day. This is the way that happened the next day, and then interpret that information to inform him how he should change his behavior to control the expression of disease. How is it that that is impossible? We have all the data, we have all of the analysis, but we have built a landscape of structures that make successfully managing health and well-being impossible. And so when we look at what that blocker is, it's just about how the data is treated and who owns and controls it. And so when we take this into the healthcare space, there's a very obvious link that our team sees between agency and gathering health data around a patient instead of around the form setup of a given electronic medical record. Because health is not what happens inside your doctor's office. Health is what happens in between doctor's appointments that is described by many aspects of your data, not just your blood pressure, but the air quality around you, your social interactions, the kinds of levels of stress that you're under, et cetera. So when we look at not only the role of a longitudinal data set in individual patient care, being able to specifically understand a risk profile of a patient or the proclivities that they might have, we can also look at what work can this data do once we gather it around a patient. And so that's kind of the second layer of product that my team has put together, which is a disintermediated data marketplace. So think like eBay for data. Each one of us produces a massive amount of data. And there are many organizations that also own incredible data records. But making those available for sale or for acquisition is extremely difficult right now. So if you're a public health researcher, getting your hands on a high quality data set about some facet of health from a large population that is trustworthy is nearly impossible. So we see the opportunity of a data marketplace to allow individuals, as we were discussing before, to financially participate in the gain derived from their data. We see data as labor. Data is an act of labor that produces an asset of great value. And we want to help consumers unlock the value for themselves, so unlock the value of their own health data and their own care, as well as unlock the financial value of their data in the broader market.
So are you working with Apple and the Apple Watch by chance?
So we are currently exploring a number of different platforms and ways to take in data. So we have looked, in terms of wearables, we've looked at the Whoop band, we've looked at Fitbit. We are starting to explore Apple Watch and Apple Health Kit. We actually think that Health Kit provides a really great model for users to be able to obtain that data and then restructure it in a way that is useful to them. So we are definitely open to playing nicely with any and all providers of data. And we're also exploring the capacity to provide an encryption facade on APIs such that we're not limited only to data at rest, but we're also able to allow individuals to accrue constantly streaming data from those more live sources so they can have a true picture of their digital expression.
Okay, so that's really cool. But you're disrupting or you're impacting some of the established health providers and health companies. Like the data is kind of owned and controlled by the hospitals right now. They're going to be kind of pissed off that you want to take that away from them. So I mean, how are you gonna deal? Are you gonna arm wrestle? I mean, how are you gonna convince these people that they want to give up something that they probably don't want to give up? And what do you do?
Gloves up.
Clubs up.
Man. No, but seriously though,
now,
let's think about the value of this data for healthcare providers. And it shocked me recently when I learned that many of the nation's foremost medical institutions, places like Sloan Kettering, places like Cedars-Sinai, are actually anonymizing and selling patient data without disclosing that to patients. So for any of you all who have ever been to Cedars-Sinai in West Hollywood for treatment, it is likely that your data has been sold to a third-party brokerage, and there has been great financial benefit. In fact, there are some hospitals that are retaining equity in startups in exchange for access to patient data.
This is nefarious.
And the patients have likely been informed, but in a small line of text in a whole litany of documents that they signed upon admission. And so we feel that this model of monetizing data isn't inherently bad, but it is exclusionary and undemocratic. And so if this model were to persist in a way that allowed patients to volitionally and transparently consent, as well as participate in the value derived, we see that as an equitable model. Now, the reason that I think hospitals are sort of scared but likely to play ball is that the media has caught wind of this practice and they've been caught with their pants down. It has been publicly embarrassing, and I saw a gentleman who's a leader in United Healthcare get cussed out in front of several hundred people in New York City the other week as a function of this practice. I think that it's coming to light, and now is the time with this Web3 movement and an age of data autonomy where end users will no longer stand for a system like this.
So I think it's a heavy lift. I mean, it really is, because you're trying to change something that's been operating the same way for decades, and people are really entrenched.
But there is a way to be sophisticated.
You have a way.
To get out of it is to pit the stakeholders against each other. In other words, you have to understand in these centralized organizations that are exercising predatory practices to understand their pain points. And tomorrow we're going to do a workshop that's going to simulate that. But for example, a pharma company, if you ask them what is their pain point, okay, because nobody thinks they're great actors. Okay, they're great actors. What is their pain point? Their pain point is that, for example, for every patient, they have to pay $20K a pop to recruit them and pay that to the hospital. So they're unhappy with that. If you talk to any CO Pharma, they will say the recruitment is just abysmal. On the other hand, you have exactly like Aaron described this, where's the patient and all that. So if you create a direct relationship between the pharma and the patient that gives a permission data set to them and they get rewarded, then you bypass that. And there are multiple bypassing that at the end you pit everyone against each other. You can disintermediate like that the PBMs, the patient group organization. Leah knows this very much, the different the middlemen or middle women that are in between, so usually middle men, but they're in the middle. It requires a little bit of strategic planning But it's not going to work if it's going to be us versus them. It's going to be to leverage them.
So you wanted to add something?
Sure, yeah. So to respond to this example that you've described, our team actually recently engaged in an exercise where we built a blockchain-based solution for medical study recruitment to condense that whole process from 4 months to about 20 minutes. And we use the parameters of an ongoing Cornell University or Cornell-Weill medical their medical system is currently conducting a clinical investigation around smoking. So we used the requirements of that study and did screening using metadata from existing EHRs instead of having self-reporting, and did execution of settlement through wallets instead of fiat currency. And so that was able to condense the process of recruitment on both ends. And the a sort of supporting benefit of the way that we built the system was exactly as you said. It was created to address the pain points of the pharmaceutical companies as well, who will be receiving this end information, as well as the individuals conducting the study itself, and then also provided not only efficiency on that end, but also active participation and visible consent from those participants in the study. And so what this exercise showed us is that the value in delivering equitable systems that acknowledge the input and value of contributions not only from patients but also from the entities orchestrating the studies, where you have this sort of multi-user design exercise where you're looking at multiple stakeholders to design a system. That's where we see the sort of warmest reception from patients, from care providers themselves, as well as from these
Warmest
third parties.
as in frequently it's a cold reception that they don't want to talk to you?
Well, like, you know, especially for care providers, how could we possibly be so, you know, arrogant as to ask them to do one more thing? There is an unbelievable crisis of burden on clinicians in America, and they are, you know, I'm sure Leah could talk about this, you know, much more than I can, but there is a shortage of care providers and a crisis of burnout because of the administrative burden on the individuals who are saving lives. And so we need to design from the perspective of the experience of that care provider, not just the patient, because the question is, you know, can we build tools that will actually impact this system? If the tools are unusable or put an undue burden on those individuals who are supposed to deploy them, we may as well have never built them.
Yeah, it's a waste. Yeah, yeah. I think it's awesome what you're trying to do. I think that in the end it may come down to legislation though, because I think there's just too many entrenched, you know, incumbents. It's hard to follow. Now you're doing something a little bit differently. You're hitting it from a different angle. How do you see your application getting kind of injected into, you know, the virus injected to the medical beast?
Well, you know, the physicians are the ones that provide the care. You know, without the stroke of a doctor's pen, you don't get your appendectomy. You don't get admitted to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and as you were saying, we've had this tremendous burden of administrative nonsense that's been placed on us as physicians and other physician providers, where we continue to have more and more paperwork that we need to do, less and less time with our patient. Technology has always been disrupting the doctor-patient relationship over the past 20 years. And so this is really an opportunity for physicians and patients to become responsible and become custodians of how healthcare is delivered and received. And, you know, with this responsibility comes tremendous reward if you're open to taking that responsibility. And I think physicians are frustrated enough that they are ready to have that responsibility and to make a big change in how they practice medicine and how they interact with the health system in order to improve their ability to care for their patients. To, you know, all of a sudden we're supposed to be spending 7 minutes with a patient, and during that time we're supposed to meet them for the first time, diagnose them, treat them, understand their entire medical history, make them feel like we care about them, and then also counsel them on all these different things that they shouldn't be doing, smoking, opiates. How are we supposed to be able to do that? And so we need to change that. And in order to do that, we need participation from physicians, providers, and patients. So the fact that you guys are all here listening to this and, you know, thinking about these things in a different way, this is an opportunity for you to consider, you know, what kind of products are going to be coming to market and what kind of products do you want to interact with as patients.
Can I
as
jump
well.
real quick
Yeah,
just
please.
so we were talking a few minutes ago about incumbents. So we look at the market, that we experience as patients, and your doctors are using electronic medical records from Epic, from Allscripts, from United Health Group, these massive pieces of software that are sort of the entrenched foundation of the American medical system. And then we also have these, entrenched systems, as you were describing, of closed hospital systems, of privatized insurance. And so where the crypto universe comes into play is irrelevant unless we can find a way to bridge from this existing infrastructure into a decentralized universe. And so we see the role of protocols in this environment as a sort of connective tissue to leverage the existing wealth of information that's trapped in these silos and try to extract it and deliver some sort of usable outcome.
Anything can be better than what we have now. I mean, it is such a mess.
Yeah, but we can't ignore what we have now.
Yes, I agree with you. So Steve, you've gotten some traction. You've taken a different angle too. How did you do that? I was asking you a little while ago, how did you get engaged with all these states?
We do a lot of talking. We visit, but I think the big thing.
It's your charm, it's your charisma.
No,
right?
Absolutely, Andrew. You hit it there. So I think one of the things that we did, we first started talking to states. We talked to health commissioners and commissioners of mental health, and we started talking to what's happening in your states, and look at what we can do. We can run campaigns on diabetes and obesity, or smoking cessation, or do these different things. And they were like, well, this is really great, guys, but, and I remember talking to a health commissioner in Alabama, and she said, Steve, we're Alabama. We have no money. Our healthcare system has been underfunded for the last 20-something years. And the only thing that we are trying to get our head around is the opioid crisis, because we're literally wheeling the bodies underneath the trees in the shade because there's no room in the morgue for the overdose deaths. And she said, we're talking about, and she said, I guarantee you that the state of Alabama is underreporting the overdoses, because I know that half of the physicians who are working in the morgues are not even trained to identify what an overdose is, and we're just underreporting it. And she said, look, we have fundamental challenges here, but you need to focus on something that we're putting our attention into. And what's happened with the opioid crisis is that it does not discriminate. It is a crisis now that is affecting all socioeconomic levels, genders, ethnicity, and it is gruesome. I mean, the stuff that's happening, not only with our youth, but with all levels of society, this is a crisis in public health that America has never faced something like this. Even at the height of the AIDS epidemic, there was not this whole system-wide failure. And Leah, we were talking about that earlier, the failures at all levels of our health system, which are compounding this. And not to mention the substances that are now we're challenging. And Alex, you spent a whole career in addiction medicine, and we now have fentanyl coming onto the street, which is 50 times more addictive than heroin.
We have the carfentanil, which is veterinarian. It's like 10,000 times more.
So this is a huge challenge. So for us, Andrew, it was about how do we engage, and we have to listen. And this goes back to what you're saying, Evan. It's the individuals. This is the promise of blockchain, is that it flattens it and it decentralizes, and it says, you can be an owner in this. And we had to listen to the states. Instead of saying, we have an enterprise software solution that you should buy, they said, no, we don't need another big system. We need something that turns it on its head.
Yeah. And I want to say this. I know I'm barging in because I think it's just so important. It's like burning, is that the economic design that we're thinking of has to come from the intellectual framework that this is not a Hollywood story of good guys, bad guys. Yeah. This is more like a Greek tragedy, that we all win or we all lose. And I'm saying that because I'm sure that everyone here in the room, they have an idea of what's broken. And some will say, you know, the patients say, well, you know, it's the insurance fault. The insurance is saying it's because the hospitals are jacking up the prices. The hospitals are saying, well, it's because the doctors are just doing frivolous stuff. The doctors are saying, well, it's because the government's not allowing us to do it. Everybody, it's such a, there's a trust, there's no trust in the system.
Just like Washington, D.C.
And so it lends itself, it just lends itself for all those reasons to be solved by distributed ledger technology with some point solutions that we spoke about today, but a general intellectual framework that none of us is as good as all of us.
Excellent. Maybe we have time for one question, one or two questions. Does anybody have a question? Right back there, there's a microphone right behind you. Just.
My name's Will. So I don't think anyone in this room would disagree that third-party involvement should be reduced in the medical system. And I think it's important that people should take sovereignty over their medical data. But could you explain a little bit more the economics of converting this change into a store of value or medium exchange and why it should be separate from our native currency? Thank you.
Well, I think, you know, a few of the companies that I've been working with, I'll say it this way, that the whole legal flurry between security tokens and non-security tokens have forced a lot of companies to abandon their redemptive system economy. So we looked at about 250 white papers in crypto health, and we saw like this bulge of, you know, suddenly they have all these self-sovereign electronic health records with a redemptive data economy behind it, and suddenly it went down to almost zero because nobody wants to do it in the US. And with a better clarification of what securitized tokens should look like, came the discussion that I started to hear among different companies of how cool would it be to own part of that solution. And so it's almost like it wasn't thought beforehand. It's not like we said, okay, the missing piece is that we have to, you know, make money on this. It was almost like this is what happened, and then people started saying, wait a second, but that is really an interesting idea.
It is.
And especially in places that do not have infrastructure, because we are talking here about what happens in the US, which is a friction-full, very tight economy where everybody's throwing pot shots at each other, and it brought it to a level of an art of obstruction.
That's right, we love to shoot each other.
Exactly. But there are a lot of countries in the world that they don't have anything.
Yeah.
So they're saying, okay, just let's do that then. And so it's turning out to be a very interesting experiment.
All right, I got the sign. I got to cut it off here right now. I want to give a little pop because tomorrow everybody is going to be here. I think everybody's here. You're doing a master class.
A whole day.
Whole day.
20 speakers.
20 speakers, blockchain, healthcare. These guys are going to fix the medical world tomorrow. So be there. Thank you everybody for coming to this session, and thank you to the panel. Big round of applause.